The bridge of the UNS Valiant hummed with the usual sounds of a ship on routine patrol. Captain Julie Morrison sat in her command chair, reviewing the daily reports on her datapad. The coffee in her mug had gone cold an hour ago, but she barely noticed. 15 years had passed since humanity first made contact with alien life, and most days in space were just as boring as they had been back when humans only dreamed of the stars. Her second in command, Peter Wright, walked across the bridge carrying his own datapad. He looked tired. The night shift always did that to him. Peter was about to say something about the supply inventory when every console on the bridge suddenly lit up with urgent alerts. "Captain, we have an incoming transmission," said Lieutenant Amy Chen from the communications station. Her voice carried a note of concern that made Julie sit up straighter. "It's on the emergency frequency, the one reserved for extinction-level threats." Julie felt her heart rate increase. In 15 years, that frequency had never been used. Not once. It existed as a last resort, a final scream into the void when a species faced total annihilation. She stood up and walked to the main view screen. "Put it through," she ordered. The screen flickered and the face of an alien appeared. Julie recognized the species immediately. Azanthari. Their skin was normally a bright blue color, but this one looked pale and sick. His large eyes were filled with fear and exhaustion. Behind him, Julie could see what looked like a command center in chaos. Other Xanthari rushed back and forth, and warning lights flashed in the background. "This is High Chancellor Verum of the Xanthari Collective," the alien said. His voice was shaking. "We are sending this message to all spacefaring species, but especially to the humans of Earth. Our civilization is dying. The Krell swarm has invaded our space. 2 of our 3 worlds are already gone. Xanthar Prime, our homeworld, will fall within days unless someone helps us." Julie exchanged a glance with Peter. The Krell were known throughout the galaxy as a nightmare species. They were like a plague of locusts, but worse. They consumed everything biological in their path and reproduced at a terrifying rate. Most species ran from the Krell. Fighting them was considered suicide. "We know that most species fear us for asking this," Verum continued. "We know that the Krell are considered unstoppable. But we have studied your species, humans. We have studied your world. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. Your planet should have killed you 1,000 times over, but instead you thrived. You evolved fighting predators that would terrify most galactic citizens. Your history is filled with warfare and survival against impossible odds." The Chancellor paused, and Julie could see tears forming in his large eyes. "If there is any species in this galaxy that can face the Krell and survive, it is you. We are not asking you to save us because we have any right to your help. We are asking because you are the only ones who might be able to. Please. Our children are dying. Our future is being erased. If you have any mercy, any compassion, please help us." The transmission ended. The bridge of the Valiant fell silent. Julie stared at the blank screen for a long moment. She thought about what the Chancellor had said. Humanity did come from a death world. Earth was a nightmare planet by galactic standards. High gravity that would crush most aliens. Weather that could kill in minutes. Diseases and predators everywhere. But humans had not just survived. They had conquered their world and reached for the stars. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," Julie said quietly. "Priority Alpha. They need to hear this immediately." While Amy worked on establishing the connection, Peter stepped closer to Julie. "You think they'll actually send help?" he asked in a low voice. "Most of the galaxy treats us like dangerous animals. The Xanthari are one of the few species that ever traded with us fairly." "I know," Julie replied, "and that's exactly why we'll help them." The connection to Earth established quickly. Fleet Admiral Curtis Hayes appeared on the screen. He was an older man with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen more combat than most people could imagine. He listened to the recording of the Xanthari distress call without interrupting. When it finished, he was quiet for a moment. "How long do they have?" Hayes asked. "Based on their reports, maybe 3 to 4 days before the Krell break through their final defensive lines," Julie answered. "After that, it's over for them." Hayes nodded slowly. "I'll take this to the Security Council immediately. But Captain Morrison, I want you to know something. If this goes the way I think it will, humanity is about to do something we've never done before. We're going to war for someone else. Not for territory, not for resources, but because it's the right thing to do." "Understood, sir," Julie said. "I'll contact you within 6 hours." Hayes out, the screen went dark. Julie returned to her command chair and sat down heavily. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly, but she could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew what this meant. The Krell were not like the pirates or smugglers that human ships occasionally encountered. They were a force of nature, a swarm of death that had destroyed civilizations before. Peter sat down in his own chair beside her. "You think we can actually beat them?" he asked. Julie thought about Earth. She thought about humanity's long, bloody history. Wars that lasted decades, battles fought in frozen tundra and burning deserts. Humans had fought each other with everything from rocks to nuclear weapons. They had survived ice ages and plagues. They had looked at a world designed to kill them and decided to thrive anyway. "The Krell have never fought anyone like us," Julie said finally. "They're used to prey that runs or dies quickly. But humans? We're persistence hunters. We're problem solvers, and we're really, really good at killing things that threaten us." 6 hours later, the call came through from Earth. Admiral Hayes appeared on screen again, but this time he was in full uniform. Behind him, Julie could see the flags of every nation on Earth. "Captain Morrison, I'm sending you the official authorization now," Hayes said. His voice was firm and clear. "The Security Council vote was unanimous. Humanity will answer the Zenthari call for help. We're mobilizing a full battle fleet. 47 ships will be ready to depart Earth within 72 hours. You are hereby ordered to proceed to Zenthari space immediately and make contact with their military command. Let them know that help is coming." Julie felt a surge of pride. This was what humanity could be at its best. Not conquerors or destroyers, but protectors. "Admiral, request permission to deliver the message personally to Chancellor Verum," Julie said. "Permission granted. Show them what humans are made of, Captain. Earth is counting on you." "Hayes out." Julie stood and faced her crew. Every person on the bridge was looking at her with determination in their eyes. "You heard the Admiral. Set course for Zenthar Prime, maximum speed, and somebody send a message to the Chancellor. Tell him the cavalry is coming." As the Valiant turned toward Zenthari space and its engines roared to life, Julie allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy had always feared humanity because they came from a world of monsters. Now they would learn that sometimes you needed monsters on your side. Earth had not seen military mobilization on this scale since the Unification Wars nearly a century ago. Within hours of the Security Council's decision, every major military installation on the planet shifted into high gear. Shipyards that normally produced civilian vessels began refitting warships. Factories that made consumer electronics started churning out weapons and ammunition. The entire industrial might of humanity focused on a single goal: save the Zenthari. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Perry stood in the briefing room of the UNS Defiant, watching as data about the Krell scrolled across multiple screens. She was the ship's tactical officer, and it was her job to figure out how to kill these things. The information they had was limited, mostly reports from species that had encountered the Krell and barely escaped to tell about it. "They're like insects on a planetary scale," she explained to the assembled officers, "but calling them insects is an insult to insects. The Krell have a hive mind that coordinates their actions. They communicate through pheromones and low-frequency signals. They breed exponentially fast once they secure a food source, and they consider all biological matter to be food." A holographic image of a Krell warrior appeared in the center of the room. It was a nightmare made flesh, 4 meters tall, covered in black chitinous armor with multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. Its head was mostly mouth, filled with teeth designed for rending and tearing. "Their acid can melt through most standard hull materials," Nicole continued. "They don't feel fear. They don't negotiate. They don't retreat. Every single one will fight until it's dead or you are. They learn from each encounter, adapting their tactics. But they have no sense of individual self-preservation. The hive is everything." Sergeant Kyle Foster, a Marine with 3 tours of combat experience, raised his hand. "So basically they're locusts mixed with those aliens from the old horror movies?" "Worse," Nicole said flatly. "Much worse. But they have weaknesses. They rely on that hive coordination. Disrupt it and they become far less effective. They're also purely biological, which means they're vulnerable to fire, extreme cold, and certain chemical agents. We're working on weapons specifically designed to exploit these weaknesses." While the briefing continued on the Defiant, similar sessions were happening across the entire fleet. 47 ships ranging from massive carriers to fast attack frigates, prepared for immediate deployment. The flagship would be the UNS Endeavour, commanded by Admiral Hayes himself. It was a statement. This mission was important enough for Earth's highest-ranking military officer to lead it personally. In the manufacturing centers across Earth, engineers worked around the clock. Dr. Linda Carter, a xenobiologist who had spent years studying alien life forms, led a team developing new weapons. She had identified the Krell's reliance on their neural network as a critical vulnerability. If we can disrupt their communication, they lose their tactical advantage. Linda explained to the weapons development team, "I've designed a sonic disruptor that broadcasts on frequencies that should interfere with their pheromone signals and neural coordination. In theory, it will turn them from a unified force into confused individuals." "In theory?" asked one of the engineers. Linda shrugged. "We've never actually tested it on real Krell, but the science is solid. It should work." The team approved her design and began immediate production. Thousands of the devices would be manufactured in the next 60 hours. They would be deployed both as large area effect weapons and as smaller units that individual soldiers could carry. Meanwhile, the Marine Corps prepared for ground combat. The Krell fought primarily through overwhelming numbers and close-quarters savagery. This actually played to humanity's strengths. Humans had spent millennia fighting each other in trenches, streets, and buildings. Close-quarters combat was something they understood intimately. New armor was produced using composite materials resistant to Krell acid. Flamethrower units, largely retired from human warfare decades ago, were brought back into service. If the Krell wanted to fight up close, humans would turn that into their funeral pyre. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morris assembled his battalion in the training center. These were the soldiers who would make the first landing on Xanthar Prime. They would drop directly into combat zones and hold ground while the main force arrived. "I'm not going to lie to you," Jake told his troops. "This is going to be the hardest fight most of you have ever seen. The Krell don't take prisoners. They don't retreat. They just keep coming until either they're all dead or we are. But I want you to remember something. We're humans. Our ancestors fought with sharpened sticks against animals that could tear them apart. We survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that lasted generations. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day, and we not only survived, we thrived." He walked along the line of soldiers, looking each one in the eye. "The Xanthari called for help because they know what we are. We're survivors. We're fighters. We're the species that looked at a universe full of dangers and said, 'Not good enough.' So when we hit that ground, when those Krell come at us with everything they have, we show them why you don't mess with Deathworlders." The battalion erupted in cheers. These soldiers were ready. They believed in their mission. They would fight not just for humanity, but for innocent people who had no one else to save them. As the 72-hour deadline approached, the fleet began gathering in orbit above Earth. Ship after ship rose from the surface or arrived from outer system patrol routes. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled in one place. News networks broadcast the gathering fleet to billions of people watching from the surface. On the Endeavour's bridge, Admiral Hayes watched as the last ships took their positions in formation. He thought about what this moment meant. For the first time in human history, they were going to war not for themselves, but for someone else. Not for conquest or resources, but because it was morally right. His communication officer interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral, all ships report ready. We can depart on your order." Hayes nodded. He opened a channel that would broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "This is Admiral Hayes to all vessels. In a few minutes, we will depart for Xanthari space. We go to face an enemy that has destroyed civilizations. We go to fight a battle that many species would consider unwinnable. But we are human. We come from Earth, a world that should have killed us but instead made us stronger. Today we show the galaxy what that means. Today we prove that the fiercest warriors can also be the greatest heroes." All ships prepare for jump. The fleet's faster-than-light drives began charging. The space around each ship shimmered with exotic energy. On Earth, people watched with pride and fear. They knew their loved ones were heading into terrible danger. But they also knew this was who humanity was at its core. When someone needed help, you answered the call. "All ships report jump ready," the communication officer announced. Hayes took a deep breath. "Execute jump. Take us to Xanthar Prime." Reality bent around the fleet. Space folded in on itself and 47 human warships vanished from Earth orbit. They would cross hundreds of light years in days, racing against time to reach the Xanthari before it was too late. In the fleet's medical bays, doctors and nurses prepared for casualties. In the armories, weapons were loaded and checked. In the mess halls, soldiers ate what might be their last peaceful meal. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew the odds. But not one person had refused the mission. Not one ship had stayed behind. Deep in the Endeavor's conference room, the senior officers gathered for a final strategy session. Maps of Zenthar Prime covered the walls. Intelligence reports detailed the Krell positions and the remaining Zenthari defenses. We'll divide into 3 battle groups, Hayes explained. 1 engages their ships in orbit. 1 provides fire support from space. 1 lands ground forces directly into combat zones. We hit them everywhere at once, overwhelm their ability to respond. The Krell are used to fighting species that panic and break. They've never fought anyone who fights back harder. The officers nodded. They knew their roles. They knew the risks. As the meeting concluded and everyone prepared to return to their posts, Hayes stopped them. "One more thing," he said. "Make sure every person under your command understands why we're doing this. We're not here for glory. We're not here for territory. We're here because the Zenthari asked for help, and we had the power to give it. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us human." The fleet raced through the void between stars, carrying with them the hopes of an entire species and the determination of Deathworlders who refused to let innocent people die. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zenthar system, and the sight that greeted them was worse than anyone had feared. The view screen showed devastation on a scale that made even hardened military officers feel sick. Debris fields stretched for thousands of kilometers, the shattered remains of orbital defense platforms and civilian stations. Bodies floated among the wreckage, Zenthari civilians who had been caught in space when the Krell attacked. Captain Julie Morrison, who had arrived days earlier aboard the Valiant, transmitted the tactical situation to the incoming fleet. "Admiral Hayes, the situation is critical. 3 Krell bioships are in orbit around Zenthar Prime. Each one is approximately 5 kilometers long. They've been dropping warrior pods to the surface continuously for the past 4 days. Estimates put the Krell ground forces at over 10 million and growing." On the Endeavor's bridge, Admiral Hayes studied the tactical display. The Krell bioships were massive organic constructs more grown than built. They looked like giant insects crossed with warships, their hulls covered in thick chitin armor, smaller vessels, what intelligence called seed pods, constantly launched from openings along their flanks, heading down to the planet below. "What about the Zenthari defenses?" Hayes asked. Julie's voice carried exhaustion and frustration. "Collapsed on 2 continents. Holding barely on the 3rd. They're fighting hard, but they're not equipped for this kind of warfare. The Zenthari are peaceful people, Admiral. Their military was designed to police their space and respond to pirates, not to fight a species like the Krell." Hayes made his decision quickly. "All ships, battle stations. We're dividing into 3 groups as planned. Group Alpha, you're with me. We take those bioships. Group Beta, Commander Peter Wright has operational command. Establish orbital fire support positions. Group Gamma, begin deployment of ground forces immediately, and someone get me a direct line to Chancellor Verum." The fleet split smoothly, each group of ships moving to their assigned positions. The Krell bioships detected the human vessels and began turning to face this new threat. From their hulls, thousands of fighter-sized organisms launched, living creatures bred for space combat. They had no technology, just biological adaptations that let them survive in vacuum and powerful acid projectors for weapons. "Here they come," said Commander Lisa Grant from the Endeavor's tactical station, counting over 3,000 individual fighters. "They're moving fast. All ships, weapons free," Hayes ordered. "Show them what human engineering can do." The space between the human fleet and the Krell forces erupted in light and fury. Human ships unleashed missiles, railgun rounds, and energy weapons. The Krell fighters were fast and agile, but they had never faced weapons designed by a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing. Missiles locked onto multiple targets using sophisticated tracking systems. Railgun rounds traveled at a significant fraction of light speed, giving the Krell no time to dodge. Energy beams sliced through the organic fighters like a hot knife through butter, but the Krell came on anyway. They felt no fear. They knew no retreat. Hundreds died in the first minute of combat, but thousands more kept coming. Some managed to reach the human ships, splattering against shields and armor, their acid beginning to eat through protective layers. On the UNS Defiant, Lieutenant Commander Nicole Perry directed the ship's defensive systems. "Concentrate fire on Grid 7. Don't let them mass up for a coordinated strike." "Engineering, how are the shields holding?" "Down to 70%, came the reply. That acid is nasty stuff. Rotate shield frequency and angle the hull to present fresh armor, Nicole ordered. She had studied the tactical reports carefully. The Krell acid took time to work. If they kept moving and rotating defenses, they could minimize damage. While the space battle raged, drop pods began launching from Group Gamma's troop carriers. Each pod contained 30 Marines in full combat armor, equipped with the new anti-Krell weapons. They streaked through the atmosphere like meteors, their heat shields glowing white-hot. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morris was in the lead pod. He checked his squad one final time as they descended. Remember your training. The Krell will rush us as soon as these pods open. First 3 rows go to flame units, create a perimeter of fire. Everyone else controlled bursts. Don't waste ammunition. These things are tough, but they're not invincible. The pods slammed into the ground in the middle of what had once been a beautiful Zenthari city. Now it was a war zone. Buildings were torn apart, streets cratered by fighting, and the air was filled with smoke and the sound of distant weapons fire. The pod doors blew open and Jake's Marines poured out. The Krell were waiting. They had heard the pods coming and swarmed toward them from every direction. In the dimming light of Zenthar Prime's sun, they looked like a wave of black death, thousands of the creatures rushing forward with their claws extended and mouths open. "Light them up," Jake roared. The Marines with flamethrowers opened up and suddenly the twilight turned to noon. Walls of fire erupted across the landing zone. The Krell ran straight into the flames, and their organic armor, tough as it was, couldn't withstand sustained heat. The creatures burned, their screeches filling the air, but more kept coming. The ones behind simply ran over the bodies of the ones who fell. This was what the Krell did. They overwhelmed through sheer numbers and relentless pressure. Jake's rifle barked in controlled 3-round bursts. Each burst dropped a Krell warrior. Around him, his Marines fought with the efficiency born of intensive training and human stubbornness. They had claimed this landing zone, and they would not give it up. High Chancellor Verum watched the human arrival from his command bunker deep beneath the capital city. When Admiral Hayes's face appeared on his communication screen, Verum felt emotion overwhelming him. The elderly Zenthari leader openly wept. "You came," Verum said, his voice breaking. "We did not know if you would. We did not know if anyone would." Hayes' expression was stern but compassionate. "We're here, Chancellor, and we're not leaving until your people are safe. But I need you to coordinate your remaining forces with ours. My people are good fighters, but we don't know your world like you do. We need your help." Verum straightened up, wiping his eyes. "Of course. I am transmitting our tactical network access now. What do you need from us?" "Show us where your civilians are sheltering. Show us your supply lines. And show us where the Krell are strongest. We're going to cut off their reinforcements from orbit. Then we're going to push them back on the ground." In orbit, the battle continued. The human ships had destroyed most of the Krell fighter organisms, but now they faced the bioships themselves. The massive vessels were incredibly tough, their organic hulls absorbing damage that would have vaporized a normal ship. Commander Peter Wright, commanding Group Beta from the UNS Valiant, analyzed the bioships carefully. "They're living things," he muttered, "which means they have to have vital organs. Tactical, run deep scans. Find me their weak points." The scans revealed what they needed. The bioships had large organs that served as both propulsion and breeding chambers. If those could be destroyed, the ships would be crippled and unable to produce more warriors. "All Group Beta vessels, concentrate fire on these coordinates," Peter ordered, transmitting the targeting data. "We're going for precision strikes. Make every shot count." The human ships adjusted their positions and opened fire with focused intensity. Plasma beams and kinetic penetrators targeted the vulnerable organs. The bioships tried to maneuver, but they were too large and slow. The first ship shuddered as its propulsion organ exploded from within. It began to drift, unable to maintain orbit. On the ground, more human forces were landing. Entire battalions of Marines deployed across the planet, seeking out Zenthari resistance fighters in civilian shelters. Wherever humans landed, the tide of battle began to turn. The Krell found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Sergeant Kyle Foster and his squad linked up with a group of Zenthari soldiers who had been holding a residential district for 3 days straight. The aliens looked exhausted and desperate. Their weapons were nearly depleted, and they had been preparing for a final stand. "We're here to help," Kyle told them through his translator. "Where do you need us?" The Zenthari commander, a female named Senna, pointed to a large building at the end of the street. They have turned that structure into a hive. Hundreds of them inside. They attack us every few hours trying to wear us down. Kyle grinned. Not anymore. We brought something special for hive structures. His squad set up sonic disruptors around the building. Dr. Linda Carter's devices hummed to life, broadcasting their disruptive frequencies. Inside the hive, the Krell warriors suddenly lost their coordination. The hive-mind connection weakened and they began moving erratically. Now we go in, Kyle said. His squad breached the building from multiple entry points simultaneously. The confused Krell fought back, but without their coordination they were far less effective. Human tactics and training made the difference. Within an hour, the hive was cleared. Senna stared at the humans in amazement. "You are truly from a death world," she said quietly. "You fight like nothing I have ever seen." Kyle shrugged. "We fight to win, and we fight to protect. That's what humans do." The ground war on Zenthar Prime settled into a brutal rhythm over the following days. The Krell had lost their orbital support, which meant no more reinforcements were arriving from space. But the millions of warriors already on the planet were not going to give up. They fought for every street, every building, every meter of ground, and the humans fought back with a determination that amazed their Zenthari allies. Sergeant Kyle Foster had not slept properly in 3 days. His squad was operating in what had been the commercial heart of Zenthar City, a massive urban area now turned into a 3-dimensional battlefield. The Krell had burrowed through buildings, creating tunnels and passages that let them attack from unexpected angles. Every structure was potentially hostile territory. "Motion sensor picking up movement 3rd floor," said Private Emma Rodriguez, checking her equipment. She was small for a Marine, barely meeting the minimum height requirement, but she had reflexes like a cat and instincts honed by growing up in one of Earth's toughest cities. Kyle signaled for the squad to spread out. They entered the building carefully, weapons ready. The structure had been some kind of shopping center before the war. Now the elegant Zenthari architecture was scarred with acid burns and claw marks. Merchandise lay scattered across the floors, crushed and abandoned. They cleared the first 2 floors without contact. On the 3rd floor, Emma's sensors went crazy. "Multiple contacts coming from above and ahead." The ceiling exploded as Krell warriors dropped down from the floor above. At the same moment, more burst through doorways ahead. It was a coordinated ambush, the kind the Krell used when their hive mind was functioning properly. But Kyle's squad had trained for this exact scenario. "Shotguns front, flamers up," he bellowed. The Marines at the front of the formation opened fire with shotguns loaded with specialized ammunition. The heavy slugs hit the Krell with tremendous force, their armor cracking under the impact. Behind them, Marines with flamethrowers sent walls of fire toward the ceiling attackers. The Krell screeched and died, but more kept coming. They poured out of hidden tunnels and passages, driven by the hive imperative to destroy the intruders. The battle turned into close-quarters chaos, exactly the kind of fighting that humans had been perfecting for thousands of years. Emma found herself face-to-face with a Krell warrior. The creature was huge, towering over her, its claws reaching for her helmet. She ducked under its strike and fired her weapon straight up into its unarmored underside. The Krell collapsed and she was already moving to her next target. "They're trying to flank us through the west corridor," someone shouted. Kyle grabbed a sonic disruptor from his pack and tossed it down the corridor. The device activated, and immediately the coordinated Krell assault faltered. The warriors began moving erratically, their hive connection disrupted. The human squad pressed their advantage, pushing forward with methodical efficiency. After 30 minutes of intense combat, the building was secure. Kyle's squad had lost 1 Marine, a young soldier named Chris who had taken a claw strike through a weak point in his armor. They carried his body out with honor. 14 Krell warriors lay dead throughout the structure. Across the planet, similar scenes played out hundreds of times. The Krell were fierce and relentless, but they were learning that humans were something different. Every species the Krell had fought before either ran or died quickly. Humans did neither. They adapted, improvised, and kept fighting no matter what. Dr. Linda Carter had set up a research station in the relative safety of a fortified zone. She was analyzing dead Krell specimens, looking for additional weaknesses that could be exploited. Her sonic disruptors were proving incredibly effective, but she wanted to give the troops more options. "Their nervous system is fascinating," she explained to a group of visiting officers. "It's distributed throughout their body, which makes them hard to incapacitate with single shots. but it also means they're vulnerable to certain frequencies of sound and electromagnetic radiation. I'm working on a new weapon that should literally scramble their nervous system. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morris, visiting between coordinating ground operations, looked at the specimens with professional interest. How long until we can deploy it? 2 days, maybe 3. I'm having them manufactured on the fleet's industrial fabricators right now. Jake nodded. Good work, Doctor. Every edge we can get helps. He turned to leave, then paused. How are you holding up? This can't be easy, cutting up dead aliens. Linda smiled grimly. I've dissected worse things, Colonel, and every bit of information I find might save human lives. That's all the motivation I need. In orbit, Commander Peter Wright was coordinating what the fleet called close air support, though in this case it was orbital bombardment. The human ships used precision weapons to strike Krell concentrations that were too large for ground forces to handle safely. Targeting data received from ground forces, reported his tactical officer. Large Krell formation massing in Sector 7. Approximately 5,000 warriors preparing for an assault on Xanthari civilian shelters. Peter studied the tactical display. The civilians were in underground bunkers protected from orbital strikes. The Krell were on the surface exposed. Approved. Fire mission, kinetic strike, spread pattern. High above Xanthar Prime, one of the human frigates adjusted its position. Magnetic accelerators launched dozens of solid metal rods toward the planet. No explosives, just dense metal moving at extreme velocity. When they hit, the kinetic energy alone was devastating. The Krell formation preparing to attack the civilian shelters never knew what hit them. The metal rod slammed into the ground like the hammer of an angry god. The shockwave and shrapnel tore through their ranks. When the dust cleared, the formation was shattered. Below ground, the Xanthari civilians heard the impact and felt the earth shake. They knew the humans were protecting them. Children who had been crying in fear began to calm down. The Deathworlders would keep them safe. High Chancellor Verum visited the human command post established near his own bunker. He wanted to see firsthand how these warriors operated. What he saw amazed him. The humans were coordinating ground forces, orbital support, supply logistics, and medical evacuation all simultaneously. They did it with efficiency that spoke of long experience. Admiral Hayes greeted the Chancellor personally. How are your people holding up? Better than they were, Verum admitted. Knowing you are here has given them hope. But I must ask, how long can you sustain this? You have been fighting non-stop for days. Your soldiers must be exhausted. Hayes smiled slightly. Chancellor, humans evolved fighting for survival every single day. Exhaustion is something we learned to push through. We'll rest when the job is done. The real breakthrough came on the 5th day of ground combat. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Perry, analyzing Krell movement patterns, identified what she believed was their central coordination node. It was a massive hive structure on the northern continent, far larger than any other hive they had encountered. This has to be it, she explained to the senior officers in a strategy meeting. All the Krell activity traces back to this location. It's their command center, their queen or central brain or whatever they use to coordinate the entire invasion force. Admiral Hayes studied the intelligence. The hive was enormous, a living structure that looked like a mountain of organic material. It would be heavily defended, but if they could destroy it, the entire Krell presence on Xanthar Prime would lose cohesion. We hit it hard and fast, Hayes decided. Orbital bombardment to soften the exterior, then ground forces breach and destroy it from inside. Who do we have available for the assault? My battalion, Jake Morris said immediately. We've been training for hive penetration. Give us air support and we can do it. The operation was planned carefully. Human ships would bombard the hive structure with conventional weapons, creating breaches in its exterior. Then drop pods would deliver Jake's Marines directly into those breaches. They would fight their way to the core and plant explosives powerful enough to destroy the entire structure. The attack began at dawn. Human ships unleashed a barrage that lit up the sky. The hive structure shuddered under the impacts, parts of its exterior wall crumbling. Before the Krell could respond, drop pods were already entering the atmosphere. Jake's Marines hit the hive in 12 different locations simultaneously. They breached the organic walls and pushed inside, into a nightmare landscape of pulsing tissue and crawling horrors. The Krell defenders were everywhere, more concentrated than anywhere else on the planet. Keep moving, Jake ordered his troops. Don't let them pin us down. The Marines fought their way deeper, using flamethrowers to clear passages and explosives to blast through internal structures. The hive seemed to fight back, organic walls shifting to trap them, acidic sprays erupting from unexpected places. But humans were stubborn. They had come to destroy this thing, and they would not be stopped. Sergeant Kyle Foster's squad reached what sensors indicated was the hive's core chamber. It was a vast space, the walls lined with some kind of organic computing tissue. In the center was a massive creature, unlike any Krell they had seen before. It was bloated and immobile, connected to the hive structure by hundreds of organic cables. "That's it," Kyle breathed. "That's their brain." The destruction of the central hive sent shockwaves through the entire Krell invasion force. All across Zenthar Prime, human soldiers and their Zenthari allies watched as the creatures suddenly lost their coordination. The hive mind that had guided their every action was gone. The Krell warriors became confused, disoriented, fighting as individuals rather than as parts of a unified whole. Captain Julie Morrison observed the change from orbit. The tactical displays showed Krell formations breaking apart. The organized assaults on defensive positions stopped. Instead, the creatures began moving randomly, some even fighting each other in their confusion. "All forces, this is command," Admiral Hayes broadcast to the entire fleet. "The enemy coordination is broken. Now we push them back. I want every Krell concentration on this planet eliminated within 48 hours. Show no mercy, they would give us none." On the ground, the human forces went on the offensive. What had been desperate defensive fighting turned into systematic hunting operations. Squads moved through the cities and countryside, tracking down Krell warriors and eliminating them. Sergeant Kyle Foster's squad was part of a sweep through the ruins of Zenthar City's eastern district. Without the hive mind directing them, the Krell had scattered into small groups. His Marines found them hiding in damaged buildings and underground passages, anywhere that offered shelter. It was almost too easy now. "Contact 2 hostiles in the building ahead," Emma Rodriguez reported from her scouting position. The squad moved in with practiced efficiency. The 2 Krell warriors tried to fight, but without coordination, they were no match for trained human soldiers. Both went down quickly. "This is almost sad," said one of the younger Marines. "They're lost without something telling them what to do." Kyle shook his head. "Don't feel too bad for them. Remember what they did to this planet. Remember Chris and all the others we lost. These things would have killed every Zenthari on this world if we hadn't stopped them." The Zenthari forces, seeing the Krell in disarray, found new courage. They joined the human offensive with renewed determination. Zenthari soldiers who had been fighting a losing battle for days now advanced side by side with their human allies. Senna, the Zenthari commander who had fought alongside Kyle's squad earlier, led her own troops in clearing operations. She marveled at the change in the situation. Just days ago, her people had been preparing for extinction. Now they were winning. "Your species is remarkable," she told a human officer during a brief rest. "Not just because you fight well, but because you chose to fight for us at all. The galaxy has always feared you. Now I think they should be grateful you exist." Dr. Linda Carter's new weapon proved devastating when it was finally deployed. The electromagnetic pulse device she had designed literally scrambled the Krell nervous system. When hit by the weapon, the creatures would convulse and die within seconds. It was more humane than burning them alive and far more efficient. "I never thought I would spend my career designing weapons," Linda admitted to a visiting journalist who was documenting the battle. "I became a xenobiologist because I wanted to understand alien life, not destroy it. But sometimes understanding is exactly what you need to protect innocent people." Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morris and his battalion continued their assault on Krell hive structures across the planet. With the central coordination gone, these smaller hives were vulnerable. They were destroyed one by one, eliminating the Krell ability to breed and reinforce their numbers. During one hive assault, Jake's force discovered something that made everyone pause. In a chamber deep within the structure, they found Zenthari civilians who had been captured by the Krell. They were still alive, though traumatized. The Krell had apparently been keeping them as a food source. "Get medical teams here now," Jake ordered. His Marines carefully extracted the survivors, treating them with gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence they showed the Krell. One of the rescued Zenthari, a young male barely more than a child, looked up at Jake with wide eyes. "Are you the Deathworlders?" he asked in broken English. Jake knelt down to the child's eye level. "Yeah, kid. We're the Deathworlders, and you're safe now. In orbit, Commander Peter Wright coordinated the destruction of the crippled third bioship. It had been drifting since the early battles. Too damaged to fight, but still potentially dangerous. Human ships surrounded it and unleashed a final barrage. The massive organic vessel broke apart, its remains burning up in Zenthar Prime's atmosphere. "That's the last of their space assets," Peter reported to Admiral Hayes. "The Krell are completely cut off now. They can't escape and they can't be reinforced." Hayes nodded with satisfaction. "Good work, Commander. Begin recovery operations for our damaged vessels and prepare casualty reports. I need to know exactly what this victory cost us." The cost had not been light. 4 human ships were damaged badly enough to need extensive repairs. The destroyer UNS Phoenix had been lost with all hands when a Krell boarding action overran the ship before self-destruct could be initiated. Over 300 Marines had been killed in ground combat, with nearly 1,000 more wounded, but they had saved an entire species from extinction. The Zenthari casualties would have been far worse without human intervention. Millions of Zenthari civilians were alive because Deathworlders had answered their call for help. As the organized resistance crumbled, the cleanup operations began. The remaining Krell were hunted down systematically. Some tried to flee into wilderness areas, but human forces tracked them using technology and methods the Krell had never encountered before. Humans were persistence hunters by evolution. The Krell learned what that meant. High Chancellor Verum emerged from his bunker for the first time in weeks. He stood in the capital city, looking at the damage the war had caused. Buildings were destroyed, streets torn apart, and the beautiful parks and gardens his people loved were now scarred battlefields. But his people were alive. Children played in the temporary shelters under the watchful eyes of both Zenthari and human soldiers. Reconstruction crews were already beginning work on critical infrastructure. There was hope again. Admiral Hayes met with Verum in what remained of the Zenthari government building. The Chancellor looked exhausted but grateful beyond words. "How can we ever repay this debt?" Verum asked, not for the first time. Hayes smiled gently. "You already have, Chancellor. You trusted us when the rest of the galaxy fears us. You looked at a species from a death world and saw potential allies instead of monsters. That trust is payment enough." "But so many of your people died saving mine," Verum said, tears forming in his large eyes. "How do I honor that sacrifice?" "You survive," Hayes replied firmly. "You rebuild. You remember what happened here. And when someone else needs help, maybe you'll be the ones who answer the call. That's how you honor our dead." The news of humanity's intervention spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Species that had kept humans at arm's length suddenly saw them in a different context. The Deathworlders had not conquered the Zenthari. They had not exploited them. They had fought and died to save them, asking nothing in return. Diplomatic channels that had been quiet for years suddenly became active. Multiple species reached out to Earth, expressing interest in formal alliances. The humans who had been seen as dangerous primitives were now viewed as potential protectors. On Earth, the news was met with mixed emotions. Pride in what their military had accomplished, grief for those who had fallen, and a growing realization that humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage in a way that could not be undone. The fleet prepared to depart Zenthar Prime, leaving behind a garrison force to help with security during reconstruction. As the ships gathered in orbit, the Zenthari organized a farewell that would be remembered for generations. Every city on the planet that still had power turned on lights in a coordinated display. From orbit, the pattern spelled out 2 words in both Zenthari script and English: "Thank you." On the bridge of the Endeavor, hardened military officers found themselves struggling with emotion. They had done their job. They had saved lives, and they had proven that being from a death world did not make you a monster. It made you strong enough to protect those who could not protect themselves. "All ships report ready for departure," the communications officer announced. Admiral Hayes took one last look at Zenthar. "Prime on the view screen." "Take us home," he said quietly. "Our work here is done." The human fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving behind a grateful species and carrying forward a new reputation. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and the galaxy would never forget it. The human fleet arrived back in Earth orbit to a celebration unlike anything in recent history. Every major city on the planet held parades and memorial services. The soldiers who returned were treated as heroes, while those who had fallen were honored with full military funerals. But the real celebration was quieter, more personal. Families reunited, loved ones embraced. Life continued. Sergeant Kyle Foster stood in his childhood home in Texas, holding his young nephew who barely remembered him. His sister cried happy tears while their parents fussed over him, making sure he ate enough. It felt surreal after the chaos of combat. Just weeks ago he had been fighting for his life against nightmare creatures on an alien world. Now he was home, and the biggest challenge was explaining to a 4-year-old why he had been gone so long. "You fought the bad bugs, Uncle Kyle?" his nephew asked with the simple logic of children. "Yeah, buddy. I fought the bad bugs so the good aliens could be safe." "Did you win?" Kyle smiled. "We won." Lieutenant Colonel Jake Morris faced a harder homecoming. He attended the funerals of 14 Marines from his battalion who had not returned. He met with their families, looked them in the eyes, and told them their loved ones had died protecting innocent people. Some families thanked him. Others could barely look at him. He understood both reactions. At one funeral, a mother grabbed his hand. "Tell me it mattered," she begged. "Tell me my son died for something important." Jake met her eyes without flinching. "Your son saved lives that would have been lost." He stood between evil and innocence and refused to move. That matters more than anything. On the Endeavor, Admiral Hayes prepared his final report for the Security Council. The battle had been won, but the war had cost humanity in ways that went beyond the casualty numbers. They had revealed their military capabilities to the galaxy. Some species would see that as threatening. Others would see it as an opportunity. "The galactic landscape has changed," Hayes wrote in his conclusion. "Humanity is no longer an isolated species to be feared and avoided. We are now seen as potential allies, protectors, and military partners. This brings opportunities but also responsibilities. We must be prepared for other species to call on us for help, and we must decide what kind of people we want to be in this larger community." Dr. Linda Carter returned to her research position at the Xenobiology Institute. She had offers from military contractors who wanted her to continue developing weapons. She turned them all down. "I designed those weapons to save lives," she told one persistent recruiter. "Now the threat is over. I want to go back to understanding life, not destroying it." But she kept copies of all her research stored securely, just in case the galaxy needed humans to fight again. Commander Peter Wright received a promotion to captain and was given command of his own ship. At his promotion ceremony, he spoke about what the mission to Xanthar Prime had taught him. "We proved that strength without compassion is just brutality. We showed the galaxy that the fiercest warriors can also be the greatest protectors. That's the standard we need to maintain." The Xanthari recovery progressed faster than anyone expected. With human assistance, they rebuilt their defensive networks and established new protocols for dealing with threats like the Krell. But more importantly, they had learned that they were not alone. The galaxy had species willing to fight for them. High Chancellor Verum traveled to Earth for the first formal state visit between their species. He addressed the United Nations General Assembly, with representatives from every human nation present. The elderly Xanthari leader spoke with emotion about what humanity had done for his people. "Before the Krell came, we thought we understood the universe," Verum said. "We believed that advanced civilizations were defined by peace, by technology, by avoiding conflict. Then we faced extinction and learned that sometimes survival requires the willingness to fight. You humans understood this. You evolved on a world that tried to kill you every day, and you learned to fight back. When we needed warriors, you came. When we needed protectors, you stood between us and annihilation." He paused, looking around the assembly hall at the faces of humans from every culture on Earth. "We called you Deathworlders. It was meant to be a warning, a classification that said you were dangerous. But now we understand what it truly means. Being from a death world does not make you death dealers. It makes you survivors. And survivors understand better than anyone the value of life." The speech was broadcast across both Earth and the Xanthari worlds. On Xanthar Prime, humans who had stayed behind as part of the garrison force watched with pride. On Earth, people who had feared that their species would always be seen as monsters felt hope that maybe, finally, the galaxy understood them. The formal alliance between humanity and the Xanthari Collective was signed 3 months after the battle. But other species had been watching. Within the year, 17 different civilizations approached Earth about military cooperation agreements. Some wanted protection, others wanted to study human military tactics. A few simply wanted to ensure that if another crisis arose, they could call on the Deathworlders for help. Captain Julie Morrison found herself assigned to diplomatic escort duties, shepherding alien delegations around Earth and explaining human military capabilities. It was far different from commanding a warship, but in its own way just as important. One delegation from a species called the Pelnar asked her directly about Earth being a death world. "How did you survive here?" their ambassador asked, looking at the weather reports that showed hurricanes, blizzards, and heat waves all occurring simultaneously on different parts of the planet. Julie smiled. "We adapted. We learned. We built shelters and developed technology. But most importantly, we worked together. No human could survive Earth alone. We needed each other. That taught us cooperation, taught us to value every life because every person contributed to the survival of the group." The ambassador looked thoughtful. "Perhaps that is why you fought for the Zenthari. You understand what it means to need help to survive." "Maybe," Julie agreed. "Or maybe we just couldn't stand by and watch innocent people die when we had the power to prevent it." Sergeant Kyle Foster eventually left active military service. He became an instructor at the Marine Training Academy, teaching new recruits about combat tactics and the importance of fighting for the right reasons. His lectures about the Zenthar Prime campaign became legendary among cadets. "We're not soldiers to conquer," he would tell each new class. "We're not warriors to terrorize. We're protectors." The galaxy learned that when we answered the Zenthari call. Don't ever forget what that means. Being strong is meaningless unless you use that strength to protect those who can't protect themselves. Emma Rodriguez stayed in active service. She volunteered for the new joint military program that the Harmony Assembly established, where soldiers from multiple species trained together. She became one of the first humans to serve in a mixed-species combat unit. Her Zenthari teammates called her Tiny Death because of her small size and fierce fighting style. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Perry transferred to Fleet Intelligence. She analyzed potential threats to allied species and developed response protocols. Her work helped prevent 3 potential crises in the first year alone, situations that could have escalated into conflicts like the one on Zenthar Prime. Dr. Linda Carter made an unexpected discovery while reviewing her Krell research. She found biological markers that suggested the Krell were not naturally aggressive. They had been altered possibly by some other species to become the consuming swarm that threatened civilized space. She published her findings, which raised uncomfortable questions about who had weaponized the Krell and why. Admiral Hayes retired from active service, but remained an advisor to Earth's military command. He wrote a book about the Zenthar Prime campaign titled Answering the Call, which became required reading at military academies across human space and was translated into dozens of alien languages. In the book's conclusion, he wrote, "We went to Zenthar Prime not knowing if we could win. We fought an enemy that had destroyed civilizations before. We risked our lives and ships for people we barely knew. And we did it because that is what humanity is capable of being at our best. We are not defined by the violence we can commit, but by the choices we make about when and how to use our strength." On Zenthar Prime, a monument was erected in the capital city. It listed the names of every human who had died defending the planet. Zenthari children learned about the battle in school, about the Deathworlders who came from across the galaxy to save them. The annual memorial service became a celebration not just of survival, but of the friendship between species. 5 years after the battle, Captain Julie Morrison returned to Zenthar Prime as part of a diplomatic mission. She walked through the rebuilt city, amazed at how much had been restored. The scars of war were still visible, but new growth covered them. Parks bloomed with native Zenthari plants. Buildings stood tall and proud. She visited the monument and found flowers placed at the base, fresh offerings from Zenthari citizens who still remembered. A group of young Zenthari approached her, recognizing the human military uniform. "Are you one of the Deathworlders?" a young female asked shyly. "I am," Julie replied. "Thank you for saving us," the young Zenthari said simply,